I think they should play with the idea, even if they're gonna, it's gonna go back. It's always gonna reboot. And DC reboots like every 20 years. I mean, were people mad back in the 1950s when all the, Flash and Green Lantern were updated? I don't think really people that many cared. Many people cared back then, but there's always going to be a reboot. And I look at it as like Ragnarok in Norse mythology. There's a big fight. It starts all over again. It's a few changes here and there. But that's just kind of how I like it. I like it to be. One of my problems with like most superhero comics is that they don't have endings. And a true like important myth in the rest of the world culture has an ending. Like Arthur died, but he's always going to be the once and future king. He's going to come back. Or Jesus dies and comes back to life. That's just, they do it. It's just a mythic thing. It's all about change.
I guess another question I want to hear your guys' opinion on is we have like Batman Rest in Peace, where one of Grant Morrison's goals in that was to go back and take some of the kind of odd, quirky stories from early Batman and bring it back into continuity.
Yeah.
So how do you guys feel about when a writer does stuff like that?
I love it. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and it depends on how well it's written. The best writer I think that does that is Jeff Johns. He always brings in the Flash Rebirth, Green Lantern Rebirth, even in his Green Lantern run, whatever, JSA. He always brings stuff back from the past, but he explains it to someone who's never read this issue back in the 50s. The problem that I have sometimes is when like Grant, there are some fun moments in there, like bringing Bat Mike and stuff, and that's pretty funny. But when you don't explain it, when you just say, when you just bring it in and say, oh, there's this one panel from this comic in the 50s, and I'm referencing this, but for all of you who never read this, like I have, there you go. And you go, why is that important? Why should I care? And Jeff, what he does is that he says, okay, this is why you should care. This is how it fits into my story, and this is why this all makes sense. So Jeff is excellent at it. And so doing that is great. And that's one of the great things about having continuity. Because if you don't have continuity, you can never do something like that. You can never reference something from the 60s. But you have to do it well. If you just go, Batman has this new costume, and then don't explain why.
The way when I read R.I.P., and also just the last year, most of my comic book reading is just from been to the Denver Public Library, and I get a completely different opinion on comics when I don't have to pay for it. Because this is just pure entertainment, it's like, but I don't, it's not based on how much money. My enjoyment isn't based on how much money I paid. It's basically, how enjoyable it was. I mean, I recently got this Hulk trade from the library, and Hulk washes up on this, Banner washes up on this island, and there's all these villains heroes from his past showing up, and at the end it just ends up, it's like a dream, or is it? That's like the worst ending. Saying that's, when it's just all a dream, for me it's the worst, because that's not even saying it was a continuity change. But it's, what is a dream? A dream might be real. But anyway, R.I.P., when I was reading R.I.P., I was looking at it, well, Batman was, the villains captured him and loaded him up with drugs and throw him out on the street. So the whole book, I saw it was what it's like to be Batman on drugs and trying to, and going through these he's going through like the Tibetan mind practices, so he was going back and forth in time, and so it was disorienting because he was disoriented the whole time, and it was a mystery.
And I think you mentioned just throwing stuff out there. Like for me, with both R.I.P. and Final Crisis at the time, when I was reading those, I was also reading those. I don't know if you guys have seen these or not, the Fourth World Omnibuses, the hardcovers that came out a few months back, about a year or so back. I was reading those at the same time. And for me, a lot of that stuff were just Easter eggs from this Fourth World stuff. It was really you know, Morrison's tribute to Jack Kirby, and that's, and I think that was kind of, you know, what you said made some people upset and didn't really explain it because it was meant as an Easter egg and not as something that, you know, was something that he really wanted to go off in a lot of detail on, because then it would have gone off in more directions than even the talented writer like Morrison is.
And I do think that he was kind of hard to follow on that. I mean, I thought like in the Invisibles, I don't know how many of you read the Invisibles, but for me the Invisibles starts really good, and by the middle it gets really good. Well, it starts good, gets bad, gets really good by the middle, and by the end of the series it just kind of devolves into just not being able, you can't really follow it too well. But and I think Morrison, he has that trap of having too many ideas and not enough time or interest to really. It's like he has his thought process too fast. It's like he can't get them out of his mouth fast enough.
Exactly. Grant's a great idea person.
Yeah.
But you know, actually writing it, like you said, is that sometimes it comes out really choppy and really confusing.
Yeah.
Which, you know, again, I keep on saying, Jeff Johns is really good at taking a great idea and then fleshing that out in what he's given. You know, he's really good at I got 22 pages to tell you why you should care about all the this new story, the continuity, and all that. And like I said, Grant has some great ideas, but he wants to tell them for so long that sometimes can't do it, can't read it. You could probably write like a 300-issue comic book series about one idea, but if you want to read that, it probably gets stale, it'll probably get boring, and so yeah, it's just all a matter about how you write and how detailed and what you can do as a writer. That's done.
And isn't the focus of a story as well as continuity, isn't that kind of the job of the editor? And should we not have maybe a little better editing?
Well, I don't think anyone wants to tell Grant Morrison at this point that he can't do something. At this point.
But
yeah, because there's so much negative backlash against it.
But that should be the job of the editor, right? I mean, you've got newspapers and TV news operations that all have editors, and they have the stars, and they still get in their faces and tell them, you know what, you can tighten this up in this way or that way. And so, shouldn't somebody step up?
I mean, in theory, but how well would have sales been on Final Crisis? Really good.
Final Crisis, yeah, it was really good. After about, at my store, a lot of people bought the first couple issues, walked in, and said, "What's happening? I don't know what's going on." And they looked at me and I said, "I don't know."
You usually ask me.
So you would explain that. But that was because it was a big event book. If Grant was telling a little story off of Vertigo, and it was that, well, I think kind of confusing and convoluted a little bit, I don't think it would have done well. The only reason why is so, Batman and Superman's on the cover, which basically that's all you have to do anymore, is put them on and they'll buy it. But one of my partners, Sean and Jason, understood it from day one, and they were all about it, and they explained it to me, and they explained it to most of the people, and it kind of made sense, but there's so much research that they had to do for that it's not accessible to anybody who's, I read tons of comics. I read one of everything that comes out every week, and I still do not know what happened.